B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Beitza Daf Gimel. We're going to start approximately in the middle of the Amud, the last word of the line, V'af Rabbi Yochanan. And we saw in the previous Daf on Daf Beis that the Mishnah on Daf Beis Amud Aleph had said that a Beitza she'noilda b'Yom Tov, an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, B'shamai omrim toichal, you're allowed to eat it. B'shilel omrim lo seichal, B'shilel say that you're not allowed to eat it on Yom Tov. And the Gemara wanted to understand what's going on, and the Gemara gave four different explanations. We had Rav Nachman that said it's talking about a hen that was muktzah. It was designated to lay eggs, not to be eaten. So the hen is muktzah, and the eggs are muktzah. The eggs are a little bit more muktzah, so to speak, because they're noilad. They're something that wasn't even around, that didn't even exist yet when Yom Tov came in, and therefore it's an even more severe type of muktzah. Beis Shammai say that there's no such thing as muktzah. There's no issa muktzah, there's no issa noilad, and therefore you aren't allowed to eat it. And Beis Hillel say that there is an issa muktzah and there is an issa of noilad, and therefore they are muktzah. Beis Shammai say they're not muktzah, Beis Hillel say they're muktzah. That was how Rav Nachman understood it. The Rabbi, Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok, they understand that the hen was not muktzah. It was a hen that was designated to be eaten. And however, there's still a machlokes. So Beis Shammai say, you can eat it. The hen is not muktzah. Anything that comes from something edible, which is not muktzah, I mean something edible, is considered just a break-off of that food item, and therefore is not muktzah. And therefore you can eat it. That's Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel, however, say you're not allowed to eat this egg. The Rabbi says it's talking about exclusively, and the Gemara discussed it more in detail, but the Mishnah is talking primarily, according to Rabbi, that it's a Yom Tov after Shabbos, and there's Hachana de Rabbi, that since an egg that was laid on Yom Tov was completed the day before it was laid, the day before was Shabbos, and there's Gzeres HaKosov, according to Rabbi, that a Yom Tov meal has to be prepared either on the Yom Tov or on a weekday, not on a Shabbos. Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok said that this egg that was separated from the hen is either compared to fruits that came off a tree or to liquids that oozed out of a fruit, and there's a Gzeira D'Rabbanon that says it's Osir, and therefore this egg is also Osir on Yom Tov. That's in a nutshell what we saw on Daf Beis. Says the Gemara, V'af Rabbi Yochanan also, Sovar Gzeira Mishum Mashkin Shezovu, holds like Rabbi Yitzchok said in the previous Gemara, that the reason that the egg is not allowed to be eaten on Yom Tov is because it's similar to liquids that ooze out of a fruit, in the same way as the liquids were balua, they were, so to speak, absorbed and inside the fruit, so too the egg was inside the hen. And therefore when the Chachomim said that mashkin shezovu, liquids that ooze out of a fruit on Yom Tov are not allowed to be eaten on Yom Tov, then they had in mind also an egg that came out of a hen. That was the Gemara we saw before. Like Rabbi Yitzchok. Where do we know that Rabbi Yochanan holds this way? The Rabbi Yochanan Rami, the Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda Umashani. Rabbi Yochanan asked a question, a contradiction between two statements of Rabbi Yehuda. The fact that he saw the two statements as being a contradiction must have meant that he understood that they were on a similar topic, and that they were based on the similar guidelines. Otherwise there wouldn't be a contradiction. And Rabbi Yochanan then answered it. And the exact answer is not really as relevant as the question. And from the question we see that Rabbi Yochanan understood that when an egg that's laid on Yom Tov is in the same bracket as liquids that ooze out of a fruit, and therefore we would expect the halachas to be the same. And obviously there was a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda that he discussed these two things. He discussed on the one hand liquids oozing out of a fruit, and on the other hand an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, and they seem not to be going hand in hand, and Rabbi Yochanan asked it as a contradiction. So you see that Rabbi Yochanan understood that Beitza she'noilda is also on Yom Tov because it's in the same gezeira as mashkin shezovu. Let's see this inside. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Ein soichatin es apeiros lahoitzi mehen mashkin. Tanakama say you're not allowed to squeeze fruits in order to to squeeze out the liquids. Ve'im yotzu me'atzmon, but if they came out, if the juices, they came out on their own, then asurim, there's a gzeira, in order that you shouldn't by mistake come to squeeze the fruits. They said that the day that the liquids came out, on that day, you're not allowed to drink these liquids. That's the opinion of the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says that im le'oichlin hayotze mehen mutter. If the object of these fruits, if the reason these fruits are being stored away is in order to be eaten, not in order to be squeezed, then actually we don't want the juices to be squeezed out. It's not what we want. We actually really don't want it to be. It's lo nichale, says Rashi. If so, there's no gezerah. We're not worried you're going to squeeze these fruits because you really don't want the juices out. And therefore, it's mutter. V'im lemashkin, if however the fruits were designated to be used for mashkin, to be squeezed for juices, then hayotze mem also, then if the juices ooze out of it, then it's also because we're afraid that you may come to squeeze it. Alma, from the fact that the Mishnah said that Rabbi Yehuda said that anything which is a food item that is not made to be squeezed, then there's no issa of mashkin sheyetzim, of mashkin shezovu, because he says it's only im le'oichlin hayotze mehen mutter. So what do we see from here? That kol oichlin, that any food item where it's not designated to be squeezed, l'Rabbi Yehuda uchla de'ofrasu. Then according to Rabbi Yehuda, anything that comes out of it is just like a piece of the food which is not muktzah, and there's no issue whatsoever of eating it on Yom Tov, of eating it on the day or drinking it on the day that it was taken out, and therefore we're going to assume kol oichlin includes an egg that was laid on Yom Tov. There should be no issue whatsoever of eating the egg on Yom Tov. That's going to be what we assume, because we know that Rabbi Yochanan understood, and we're about to see that clearly. Rabbi Yochanan understood the reason that an egg which is laid on Yom Tov is osir, is because of a gzeira mishum mashkin shezovu, and therefore if we see here that kol oichlin, that there's no issue, that it includes an egg which is oichlin, the hen is an oichel, it's not made to be squeezed out, and therefore the egg should be mutter. Voidom Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, there's another statement from Rabbi Yehuda that says, Masne odom al kalkolo shel peiris. If on a Rosh Hashanah, where Rosh Hashanah there's always 2 days Rosh Hashanah, and Rabbi Yehuda assumes that it's not considered as one long day, it's considered as 2 separate days. There's first day Rosh Hashanah, second day Rosh Hashanah. We practice 2 days Rosh Hashanah because we don't know which day is the real Rosh Hashanah. But in actual fact, only one of the 2 days is really Rosh Hashanah, the other one is a regular weekday. That's what Rabbi Yehuda holds, and therefore there's ramifications to this by an Eruv. We know that we learned this in Eruvin. If somebody wants to go outside the Tchum, he can make an Eruv. But you cannot have 2 Eruvs in the same Shabbos, because an Eruv, so to speak, is representing where you are when Shabbos comes in, or when Yom Tov comes in. So if you have an Eruv in the Mizrach and Eruv in the Ma'ariv, they cannot both be valid. But a person can say, I'm having one Eruv for first day Rosh Hashanah, and an Eruv on the other side for second day Rosh Hashanah, and they're not a contradiction, because only one of those 2 days are really Yom Tov. So if the first day is Yom Tov, the second day is a weekday. If the first day is a weekday, the second day is a Yom Tov, and therefore there's no problem with having an Eruv on 2 separate sides. That's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. It's considered Shtei Kedushes. Were we to say that the 2 days Rosh Hashanah is like one long day, you would not be able to have 2 Eruvs, because the onset of the first day is the onset of the 2 days, and you cannot have an Eruv on 2 different sides. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that Rosh Hashanah is 2 days, it's not considered as one long day. And Rabbi Yehuda says that if you've got a basket of fruits and you forgot to take Trumas and Maestros from it, you're not allowed to take Trumas and Maestros on Yom Tov. What can you do? So on the first day Rosh Hashanah, you can make a condition as follows. You can point out to certain fruits and say like this: if today is Rosh Hashanah, then what I'm about to say now is invalid, because on Rosh Hashanah you can't take Trumas and Maestros. But if today is Rosh Hashanah, then I want these fruits to be Meiser tomorrow. And if tomorrow is the real Rosh Hashanah, then I want these fruits to be Meiser today. So whichever way you hold it, you're only taking Meiser on the weekday, not on the Yom Tov day. On the first day, you can't eat from these fruits because maybe it's Yom Tov, and if it's Yom Tov, you can't take Trumas and Maasros. It's not yet valid. But tomorrow, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, whichever way you hold it, you're allowed to eat from those fruits. Because if the first day was Rosh Hashanah, then now on the second day is really a weekday. Just we don't know, so we have to act as if it's Rosh Hashanah, but really it's a weekday. The Trumas and Maasros are valid. And if yesterday was the weekday, then the Trumas and Maasros I took yesterday are valid. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Masne odom al kalkolo shel peros, a person can make a condition with a basket of fruits, b'yom tov rishon. He can make this condition on the first day of Yom Tov, v'oichlo b'sheni, and on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, you can eat the fruits. V'chein, says Rabbi Yehuda, beitza shenoilda b'rishon. When an egg was laid on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to eat the egg, but only on the day it was laid. So if it was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's mutter on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. V'chein beitza shenoilda b'rishon. Since Rabbi Yehuda holds that there are two independent days, it's not considered one long day. If an egg was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you're allowed to eat it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Because either way, if the first day of Rosh Hashanah was Yom Tov, the second day is Chol. If the first day was Chol, the second day is Yom Tov, and either way, you can eat the egg on the second day. Teichel b'sheni. B'sheni in, b'rishain lo. So what do we see from there? That when the egg was laid, when it was laid on the first day of Yom Tov, you're not allowed to eat the egg. You're only allowed to eat it the next day. So here we have a contradiction. Rabbi Yochanan asked the contradiction. Why do you say that you're allowed to eat the egg on if the egg was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to eat the egg on the first day of Rosh Hashanah? Did Rabbi Yehuda not say a few lines earlier that anything which is not made to squeeze out the fruit, the juices from it, im la'oichlin hayotze behen mutter? So from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan asked that question, you see that he understood that the reason that Beitza Shenolda would be aser is because of Gzeira of Mashkin. And therefore, since the Gzeiras Mashkin doesn't apply to this hen, therefore Rabbi Yochanan asked a contradiction. So why can you not eat the egg that was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah? Umeshani Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan answered the contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda, Muchlefes Hashita. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it was Yotzu Me'atzmon, it's also to drink it in the first case, where it's talking about the juices that came out. Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if it came out of an oichel, something that you were not going to squeeze, nonetheless, it's also. He changes around the two opinions. What we thought was the Tanakam is really Rabbi Yehuda. And then it coincides that indeed, when the egg is laid on Yom Tov, then it's called mashkin sheyotzim on their own, and it's also to drink the juices, and also to eat this laid egg. So you see clearly midikobarami lahu adodi. Since Rabbi Yochanan asks the contradiction between these two statements of Rabbi Yehuda, then Shema Mino, we see that Chad Taimahu, that is the same reasoning. That if you say that mashkin hayotzin is also on that day, then they'll also say that a laid egg is also. So you see that the status, the halacha of the laid egg is to do with this gezerah of mashkin shezovu. And once the Gemara's mentioned this seeming contradiction in what Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yochanan's explanation, well, the Gemara is going to bring another two explanations how we could answer the two statements of Rabbi Yehuda. Ravina Omar, Ravina says a different answer to Rabbi Yochanan. He says, La'olam loy teifach. You don't need to turn it round. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that mashkin, any liquids that ooze out of any solid, which a type of solid which is not the intentions of squeezing it, is there's no problem with it. There's no gezeras mashkin. You're going to ask me a question, if so, why does Rabbi Yehuda say that an egg that's laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, why are you not allowed to eat it? The answer is, Rabbi Yehuda l'divreim d'Rabbanon ka'amalu. According to Rabbi Yehuda, l'didi afilu b'rishay nami sharia. Rabbi Yehuda hold there's no issue with an egg that's laid on the first day of Yom Tov, because I hold that Beitza Shenilda b'Yom Tov is mutter, like the mashkin, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that the mashkin shezovu me'elem, if it's coming from a fruit which is not, or coming from any source that's not made and designated to be squeezed, there's no problem with it. And therefore it's mutter. Because since it's coming from a food, called the oichlo, it's coming from a food item, and therefore whatever's in it and coming from it is just considered as part of the fruit, and therefore there's no problem with it. Elo leditchu, Rabbi Yehuda is responding to the Chachomim. You Chachomim who say that there is a problem with it. You Chachomim who say that Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov is also because you hold that anything that comes out, any mashkin that come out of any food item is muktzah, is not allowed to be eaten. So oidu limios, at least agree with me, the b'sheni sharia, that it's only also on the first day, it's not also on the second day. At least that much agree with me. The Shtei Kedusha is him, because the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are not considered a single long day, and then Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov Rishon Shel Rosh Hashanah, it's as if the 2 days are one day, and it remains also till the end of the second day. At least agree with me that it's not true that, and that Rosh Hashanah is 2 days, one of them Kodesh, one of them Chol, and therefore an egg that was laid on the first day is mut on the second day. The Rabbanon responded to that, Loi, we don't agree with you. Kedusha achasi, we say that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are really one long day. And therefore, when it comes to Eruv, you cannot make an Eruv on two separate sides for the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And when it comes to an egg that was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we say it's also even on the second day because it's considered as if it's one long day. That was Ravina's explanation, so there shouldn't be a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda. Ravina Breder of Ula Omar, a third explanation. But this second brisa, where Rabbi Yehuda says that an egg that was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah is also on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, is b'tarnagoles or imedes legadol beitzim. We're not talking about a type of a hen which is not muktzah, and therefore the egg is not muktzah, and the whole issue was only because Gzeras Mashkin, as we saw before. No, Ravina Bereder of Ula says that Rabbi Yehuda there is talking about a type of a hen which was muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda letamed isle muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda is the person who holds that of muktzah, and therefore, since the hen is muktzah, the egg is also going to be muktzah, and therefore you're not allowed to eat the egg on the first day of Yom Tov. And now the Gemara is going back to the reasons we saw in Daf Beis as to why Beis Hillel, this machlokes Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, but why did Beis Hillel in the Mishnah say that Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov is, you're not allowed to eat it on Yom Tov? Lo yisoichal. And they say we're talking about a hen which in and of itself is not muktzah. It was a hen that was designated to be used as food on Yom Tov. Rabbi said there was an Issa Deiraisa. A Yom Tov meal has to be prepared on a weekday, and the Mishnah is talking about a Yom Tov that was after Shabbos, Yom Tov that was on a Sunday. An egg that's laid on Sunday was prepared on Shabbos inside the hen, and therefore you're not allowed to eat it on Yom Tov. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok said there was a gzeira that the egg coming from the hen is compared either to fruits that fell off a tree or from liquids that oozed out of a fruit. Meisvei. We're going to see now in a brisa, and this brisa is split into four parts. We have to stay focused because the Gemara is going to move between them. Echod beitza shenolda b'Shabbos. That's part number 1. Part number 2, ve'echod beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov, ein metaltelin oisa, loy lechases bo es akli, v'loy lismach bo karei amito. An egg that was born, that was laid on Shabbos or Yom Tov, is completely muktzah. Not only are you not allowed to eat it, you're not allowed to touch it. It's muktzah, you can't use it to cover a little vessel with it, utensil with it. You can't use it to lean some beams of a bed on this egg. Eggs are, when they're positioned in the right way, can carry quite a substantial weight. It's completely muktzah, and these eggs are not allowed to be used on Shabbos when they were laid on Shabbos, or on muktzah or on Yom Tov when they were laid on Yom Tov. That's the first part of the brisa, and we're not going to discuss that much. But now the next 2 parts of the brisa, that's going to be the challenge. So aval koife oleos akli. Sorry, this is still a continuation of the first part, that even though the egg in and of itself is muktzah, one is allowed to turn a utensil upside down over the egg to protect it from getting broken. And there is an element of chiddush on this, because we saw in Shabbos Daf Mem Gimel that Rabbi Yitzchok in the Gemara says you're not allowed to move a utensil for the sake of serving something which is muktzah. Here you're moving the utensil to put it upside down on an egg which is muktzah, so this would not follow Rabbi Yitzchok. So now comes the challenging part of the brisa. Usfeika asura. If you don't know whether this egg was laid on Yom Tov or not, or on Shabbos or not, if you have a doubt, the egg is osa. You have to assume, or at least you have to be cautious for the fact that it could have been born or could have been laid on Shabbos and Yom Tov. That's one halacha we have to understand. Safik by this egg is osa. Another halacha, ve'im nis'arvo be'elef. If this egg, which is either an egg which was noiled b'yom tov or safik noiled b'yom tov, then got mixed into another 1,000 eggs, and normally we have a rule of bittul. Nonetheless, kulon asuros. Bittul means that they get nullified. Different isurim and different halachas of when and how bittul works. Where sometimes it's roiv, sometimes it's shishim, sometimes it's 100, it's 200. There's many different halachas. But here it says that even if this egg is mixed in with another 1,000 eggs, which are definitely okay and not muktzah, nonetheless, kulon asuros, the bittul, the nullification, but the bittul does not work, is invalid, and it's osa. And on these two stages of the brisa, number one, safik is osa. Number two, afilu be'elef loy bottle, need to be understood. Says the Gemara, Bishleim Rabba, according to Rabbi, who says Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov is also because of Hachana, and then we're talking about that the day before it was a Shabbos, and then it's Issa Deiraisa to use this egg on Yom Tov, Mishum, then have a Sveika Deiraisa. Then it must be the Brisa, which says that Echad Beitza Shenolda B'Shabbos, Echad Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov must be talking about Shabbos after Yom Tov or Yom Tov after Shabbos, and then it's an Issa Deiraisa. And we know that whenever there's a suffix in the chiyuv deiraisa, you have to be machmir v'chol sveika deiraisa l'chumra. Elo l'Rav Yosef u'Rabbi Yitzchok. According to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok, the Omri Mishum Gzeira, who said that the only reason Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov is osir is because, and here we're assuming that this is coming from a hen which was not muktzah. Then we assume that the hen itself is not muktzah, but the egg is not allowed to be eaten because of a gzeira, then that gzeira is only d'Rabbanon. Sveika d'Rabbanon hi. It's only a d'Rabbanon, even when you know that it was definitely laid on Yom Tov, it's only awesome d'Rabbanon. When you have a doubt, it's a suffix d'Rabbanon, v'chol sveika d'Rabbanon l'kula. So according to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok, how are they going to learn this brisa? Answers the Gemara, Omalei seifa oson l'sofik treifa. The statement, the part of the brisa that says a sofik is osa, is not talking about when it was laid on Yom Tov and you have a sofik. Was it laid on Yom Tov? Was it not laid on Yom Tov? No. We're talking about just any time. In the middle of the year, a regular day, and there's a sofik. Was this egg laid by a treifa animal or a not treifa animal? And treifa is an issa deiraisa. And therefore, the safik is asur. Says the Gemara, Ihacha, if so, Ema Seifa, let's go to the very last stage of this brisa, that says that afilu be'elef loy bottle. Let's try and work that out. This arvo be'elef kulon asuris. I amrus b'shleima safik yom tov safik chayil. If you say that the statement before it, that when there's a safik, then it's asa, is talking about that the safik was the egg laid on Yom Tov? Was it laid on Erev Yom Tov on a weekday? Then have it dover. Then I can understand if that egg gets mixed in to all the other eggs. Have a dover sheyesh matirin. We know there's a rule that anything that the issa on it is just temporary, and with time the issa is going to go away from it. It's called a dover sheyesh matirin. And then the Chachamim say, why resort to bittul? Just wait, and then you can eat it without bittul. Dovo sheyesh matirin, v'chol dovo sheyesh matirin. Any issa that's going to have a heta soon, afilu be'elef, even when it's mixed into 1,000 times its own volume of heta, loy botil, it does not get nullified there. That's if the suffix of the brisa is talking about a suffix, whether it was on Yom Tov or not on Yom Tov. That's a dovo sheyesh matirin, because after Yom Tov, then the egg is always going to be mutter. But the problem with that is that it's only osir midrabanon. Like we said before, according to Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok, it's only osir midrabanon, the issa of Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov. And then if it's only osir midrabanon, why is feikoi osir? That's a question which is a complicated question, and we're going to have to answer that. The Gemara is soon going to answer that on Daf Daled Amud Aleph. But if we say that the sofik, the reason that it's asa is because it's a sofik treifa, then by sofik treifa, then dovo she'ein le matirin hi. The issa of treifa never leaves the item that was treif, and therefore v'tibotil. Beruba, why don't you say the regular rules of bittul beroiv apply, that if you have a majority of heta, they nullify the issa from the minority. And if this egg, which was a sofik issa, then falls into 1,000 eggs, why does the Brisa say that it's not bottle? V'chi tema, are you going to suggest that the reason that the bittul doesn't work is because beitza chashuva v'lo botla, that anything which is important, anything that is significant, we do not nullify. Something insignificant gets nullified in a majority. When there's many more its volume, then it can get nullified. But something that's significant never gets nullified, never becomes seen as if it's bottle. So are you going to say that an egg is a significant object, is a significant item, and therefore v'lo bottle? So even though we said before that we're talking about an egg which is a sofik treifa, sofik not treifa, and therefore as far as dovo she'esh le matirin is concerned, bittul should work, but as far as dovo choshuv is concerned, the dovo choshuv is not bottle. Says the Gemara, okay, but let's try and understand this, that how choshuv, that means what determines whether it is choshuv enough, it's significant enough not to be bottle. So there's going to be 3 levels of that. Some say anything that is sold by the number is already called choshuv. The very fact that I'm numbering it during the sale makes it significant enough that it would not be bottle. Others say, as long as many people sell it by the number, that's what makes it significant. Others say it's got to be that everybody sells it with the number in order for it to be significant. Now, eggs are not the least level, but they're not the highest level either. It's most people sell it by the number, not everybody. So now the Gemara is going to discuss. According to the one that says that as long as most people sell it by the number, then it's considered significant enough, and it's not bottle, then I can understand why the egg is not bottle, even be'elef. According to the opinion that says that it's only considered important enough, that it will not be nullified. If everybody sells it with the number, eggs, not everyone sells it with a number. So when it says in the last state clause of this brisa that an egg which falls into 1,000 eggs which are okay and mutter to be eaten, is nonetheless it stays osir, what would be the reason for that? So according to what we said before, if we were talking about that the sofik is a sofik whether it was laid on Yom Tov or not laid on Yom Tov, then I can understand it's a dovo she'esh le matirin, and therefore it's not bottle even be'elef. But if you say that it's a sofik treifa, then it should become bottle unless it's a dovo shebeminyan, something that is sold by the number. Is it a dovo shebeminyan? It depends according to which opinion. According to the opinion that only something that's always sold by number is that significant that it's not bottle, an egg definitely wouldn't fit that bill. And then we have a question, why is it not bottle? Ditnan, where do we see an argument as to how many people have to sell these items with a number, with a minyan, to make it important enough, significant enough that it's not bottle? In the following Mishnah, Ditnan, if somebody has bundles of tilson that are kilei kerem, we know that certain things that grow in a vineyard become kilayim, called klei kerem, and they have to be burnt. Yidloikus, if somebody has got bundles of tilson which are klei kerem, then yidloiku, they have to be burnt. Nisarvu ba'acheris, if these bundles got mixed into other bundles that were not klei kerem, va'acheris ba'acheris, and those bundles got mixed into even other bundles, that means it's got mixed in a whole bunch of times. There's so many more bundles now than that are mutter than those bundles that were osa. Kulon yidloiku, all of them have to be burnt. Divir Reb Meir. Reb Meir says there's no bittul. A bundle of tilson does not become nullified. The Chachamim say no, bittul does apply. Yalu means yalu ba'achas u'mosayim. It's exactly what the word yalu means. Rashi says here, bittul works And what you have to do is that if you have 200 times or 201 times heter over the issa, then you take one volume of the issa, you separate it, and that you have to burn, and all the rest is mutter. Those are the rules of bittul by klei kerem. So Reb Meir says there's no bittul, the Chachamim says there is bittul. And now the Brisa is going to explain, the Mishnah is going to explain, Shehoya Reb Meir Omer. Reb Meir explains why is there no bittul, because he says, Es shedar kolimnoi, since it was a common practice to sell these bundles with number, by the number, not by an overall weight or estimation, but by an individuality of each one, then Es shedar kolimnoi is mekadesh. Mekadesh means it's been set aside, it means it's osa. Mekadesh is also used for holiness, which is also a certain separation, elevation from the mundane, and it's also Kadesha is something which is separated for to be burnt. So that's what Reb Meir says. Reb Meir says that it's a davar shebeminyan, it's chashuv. The Chachamim say that bittul does apply. Why? There's only 6 things which are significant enough that they prevented them from becoming nullified, from becoming bottle. Rabbi Kiva adds a 7th one. What are the 6? Egoize perach. Egoizim are nuts that come from a place called perach, which is a type of a tree. V'rimoine badon, and the pomegranates from badon. V'chovye stumais. V'chilfei tardin, v'kilchei kruv, v'delas yavonis. Those are the 6 things that are very significant and therefore would not be, if were they to be osir, we'll soon see which is surim, because some of these are trees, some are not. Trees have an issa of orla. Those that are not trees, they can have the issa of klei kerem if they were grown in a vineyard. Whichever way it is, when they become osa, they do not become bottle. Rabbi Kiva moisif av kikris shel balabayis. Rabbi Kiva says also the loaves of bread that are baked by private people are also significant enough that they do not become bottle if there would be an issue with it. And haroi orla, those things on the list which are trees, they are subject to this of orla, and if they are orla, and then they get mixed into many others, they do not get nullified. Haroi l'klei kerem, and those things that are not orla, because they're not trees, they could become also with klei kerem. When they become also with klei kerem, they will then not become bottle. The klei kerem is klei kerem. So this is what we saw in the Mishnah. Now we'll notice that Reb Meir said, the Reb Meir who said there's no bittul, why is there no bittul? Es shedar kolimnois. It was actually machleikus now in the Chachamim exactly what these words actually said or meant. Es shedar kolimnois. V'itmar we learnt that itma alop, regarding this Mishnah we learnt that Rabbi Yochanan Omar es shedar kolimnois sheninu. Rabbi Yochanan said, what does it mean? What did Reb Meir mean es shedar kolimnois? He said that the reason that these chavile tilton are not bottle is because everybody sells them by the number, not just a lot of people, everybody. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Omar, Reb Shimon ben Lakish says no. Kol shedar kolimnois sheninu. Any time where the majority of people sell it with a number, it's sufficient enough to make it significant enough that it doesn't become bottle. So you see clearly, there's a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, whether the significance that you need to prevent the nullification, is it es shedar kolimnois or kol shedar kolimnois? So Hanicha Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Kunt Shimon ben Lakish that says kol shedar kolimnois, as long as there's many people who count it, it's enough to make it significant, then I can understand you coming back to the eggs that that were noilad on Shabbos or Yom Tov, or if it's a suffix, it was noilad Shabbos and Yom Tov, then since these eggs are osa, for whatever reason we said, that means the suffix is osa either because it's suffix achona is deraisa or suffix treifa is deraisa, and we'll soon see some more explanations. Then once it's osa, it's not bottle, because eggs are often and usually sold with a number. Elo Rabbi Yochanan who says that the reason Rabbi Meir says that these bundles of tilson are not bottle is because everybody sells them by the number. Eggs, not everyone sells it with the number. If so, eggs are not called a davar shebeminyan. If they're not called a davar shebeminyan, then they should be bottle. So why does the Brisa say that? Afilu be'elef loy bottle. Ma'ikel meimar. What can we say? Answers the Gemara. Omar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Hi Tana de litrok tzioisu. There's a Tana which we're about to see, which is a Tana we're going to see soon exactly who this Tana is, but it's a Tana regarding the concept of a litra, which is a weight, of ktzios, which is part of the pressed figs. But these ktzios, there's going to be one opinion that says, Hu de Omar, kol dover shebeminyan. Anything which gets counted, it doesn't matter. A lot of people, a few people, everybody makes no difference. Afilu b'derabonon loy bottle, even when it's an issa derabonon, it doesn't become bottle. And therefore, according to that opinion, the Brisa makes a lot of sense. This egg, definitely some people sell eggs by the number, and therefore it's called choshev, and therefore it's not bottle, even if the issa is an issa derabonon. We have a problem with the issa derabonon, and that is why is the sofik osir at all. But as far as we'll have to work on that. But as far as the bittel is concerned, dover shebeminyan is loy bottle. The kolshkin b'deraisa and kolshkin in the case which we're talking about, where the sofik is a sofik treifa, sofik not treifa, which is the stage we're up to now, that the part of sofik is sofik treif, sofik not treif, which is an issa deraisa. There even more so, it's not bottle if it's got any level of dover shebeminyan. Ditnan. And it's a question, how much of this is a Mishnah, how much of this is a Brisa, but we learned as follows. Litra ktzios. Litra is a certain weight of ktzios, which are pressed, which are these figs. And the way they would do it is that these ktzios, first of all, are a fruit. And fruits, most fruits, the chiyuv of trumas and maisrus is only midrabanon. So we're talking here about a chiyuv derabanon of trumas and maisrus. Shedorosa, what they used to do is they used to press it into a mold or into some shaped utensil, and they would press it there, they would dry up together into a pressed cake of whatever they was getting pressed here. So these ktzios that were shedorosa, that were pressed al pi ogul in the mouth of a mold. So you had a whole bunch of molds, and you don't know which one of these molds you pressed these figs, and these figs were actually a truma derabonon. And what happened was, he's pressed these figs into the mouth of one of these molds, and you don't know which one it was. So now you've got the top layer of the figs in one of these molds that are truma derabonon. And what do we do now? We don't know which one it is. Do we have to assume all of them to have the status of truma, or do we use some level of bittel? Or al pi chovis, he pressed these figs into the mouth of a cask. He doesn't know which cask. Or al pi kaveres, or he pressed them into the mouth of a basket, the top of the basket. He doesn't know in which basket he pressed these figs. So Reb Meir Omer, is going to be machlokas now between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda as to what is the machlokas Reb Eliezer and Reb Yeshua. Reb Meir says that the following is the machlokas. Reb Meir Omer, that Reb Eliezer says, Royin eso elyoinois ki'ilu hein prudois, v'atachtoinois mailois eso elyoinois. Reb Eliezer maintains that even though we know that the questionable figs, the figs that we're discussing, that are truma derabonon, were pressed on the top of this utensil, whether it's the mold, whether it's the cask, or whether it's the basket, nonetheless we use the concept of bittel. But not only do we say that because for truma derabonon to be bottle, it's bottle in 101 times its volume. So not only do we say this bittel, that if there's 101 casks or 101 molds that are certainly not truma, and on one of them we know the top is truma, then it's all bottle. That definitely would be bittel. But Rabbi Eliezer says even more than that. He says that even if you don't have 101 casks, but you have the volume of the top of these figs, that means these figs that were pressed at the top of this utensil, that if the volume of that, you have 101 times more that volume, which is certainly not truma, any place within these casks or within these baskets or within these molds, even though we pressed it at the top, and we know for certain that the figs at the bottom are definitely not in the equation, they're definitely not in this taroivus, this mixture, because the only thing which we don't know is the top. Which of these casks, the top of it is truma. Nonetheless, since it's only d'Rabbanon, it's truma d'Rabbanon. Rabbi Eliezer says you can include in the nullification even the figs at the bottom of all the baskets. And therefore, if you have 101 times the volume of these truma figs, then it's all bottle, and you can assume them all not to be truma. So that's what it means here. Royan, we imagine that's what elyoinois kilo ein prudois. It's as if we've separated those figs, the top from the bottom. Vatachtoinois mailois el elyoinois. And the figs at the bottom of all the existing baskets are all included in the volume that can nullify, if there's 101 times more, the figs that were truma. Rabbi Shua says no, we don't go that far. We can only take into account the tops of the barrels, the tops of these casks or the molds or the baskets, because we know that the questionable figs were at the top. So therefore, the figs at the bottom don't come into the equation at all. If you have 101 molds that are certainly not truma, and one mold that has truma in it, only then it's bottle. Im yesham mea pumin, if you have 100 times that volume, that means it's bottle in 101, which means if you have 100 times the mouths, that means 100 casks or 100 molds or 100 baskets that are not truma, then yalu, then they can help the nullification and it becomes bottle. V'imlav, then hapumin asur. And if you haven't got 100 times the tops, the 100 mouths more of the chulin than of this truma d'Rabbanon, then the bittel is not bittel, and all the casks, the tops of all the casks, we have to assume them to be truma d'Rabbanon. Vashulayim, but according to Rabbi Yeshua, all the figs at the bottom of the casks, they are all not in the equation, because we know that the truma wasn't put at the bottom, it was pushed into the top. That was how Rabbi Meir explained it. Rabbi Yehuda says no. He says Rabbi Eliezer Omer, that what we said before from Rabbi Yeshua was really Rabbi Eliezer opinion. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im yesham mea pumin, if you have 100 mouths of these molds, casks or baskets that are chulin, yalu, then they are mevatel, the one which is truma d'Rabbanon. Ve'im lav hapumin asurin. And if not, then all the mouths, all the figs in all the mouths are assumed to be truma d'Rabbanon and are also, that means you have to eat them according to the halachas of truma d'Rabbanon. Vashulayim, and all the figs that are at the bottom are mutarim, they're all mutar. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, and this is the opinion that we're talking about. When we mentioned before the Tana de Litra Ktzios that says that Kol Dover Shebeminyan Afilu b'Drabanon Lo Yibatel, this is where it is. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Afilu Yesham Shloish Meis Pumin, even if you have 300 casks that the tops of them are all chulin, and just one of them mixed into them, which the tops of them are truma d'Rabbanon, lo yalu, it will not become nullified, and all of them are going to have to be assumed to possibly be the one with the truma. Dorsa be'igul, and the Brisa continues, and it's very challenging. The Gemara is going to discuss in a minute what this means. Dorsa, if you pressed it, be'igul, into one of these molds, ve'enedea be'iza ogul, and you don't know in which mold you pressed it, be'iza ogul dorsa, divrei hakil yodu, then everybody agrees that it's bottle. The Gemara is asking, I don't understand. Divrei hakil, hainu pluktainu. You just had a whole big machlekes here when you press the figs into the mouth of one of these molds and you don't know which mold it was. So how are you ending off saying that if you pressed it into a mold and you don't know which one it was, everyone says it's bottle? What's that supposed to mean? Omer of Papa says this is how you have to understand the last statement of that brisa. Hochi koma, dorsa be'igul, ve'eni yedem be'ezem mokoim igul dorsa. Till now we were talking about where you know that the whole top, the whole mouth of a mold has that truma tameo in it, has the truma d'Rabbanon in it. It's truma d'Rabbanon. Then it's very clear where it was, at least in this barrel, in this cask, in this mold. But if you don't even know which side it was, that means it's not even clearly defined. You don't have a clearly defined knowledge where within the mold you put these truma figs, then that means you don't know either tzfoin or either droim, on the north side, the south side, divrei hakol yalu. Then everybody says that it is bottle. So if you know where in the top of this mold you pressed those figs, you just don't know which mold it was, then it's called a dover shebaminyan, because the tops are sold on their own, so to speak. They're an entity of their own, and it's a dover shebaminyan. And that's why Rabbi Yeshua said, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yeshua said, even in 300 it's not bottle, because it's a dover shebaminyan, it's ain't a bottle. However, if even within the mouth of this mold you don't know where it is, then you can't say it's called a dover shebaminyan, because it's not something discernible. It's just on one side, you don't know, you can't recognize which side it is, what side it was, you don't know what's going on, and therefore it's not considered a dover shebaminyan, and therefore it's bottle. But what do we see from here? According to Rabbi Yeshua, that kol dover shebaminyan afilu b'drabanon lo bottle, it's talking about truma d'rabanon, the kol shkein d'oraisa, and even more so when it comes to sofik treifa. So when we're dealing with the sefer of that brisa that we started with on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, that says afilu be'elef loy bottle, we said that if it's talking about a sofik yom tov sofik, not yom tov, it's a dover sheyesh le matir, and that's why it's not bottle. And if we're talking about sofik treifa, then it's not bottle because it's a dover shebaminyan. Either dover shebaminyan, according to the opinion we just saw now, that any level of dover shebaminyan is loy bottle, or according to the opinion that said that we saw before, according to Resh Lakish, that if most people sell it with a minyan, it's also considered a dover shebaminyan, and therefore loy bottle. Now says the Gemara, and now we're coming back to the middle stage of the brisa that says that a sofik, if you have a sofik, then it's osa. We weren't sure why should it be osa. We said according to Rabbi that it's sofik hachona de Rabbi, which is an issa deraisa. We understand sofik deraisa lechumra. If you say sofik treifa, sofik not treifa, we can understand sofik deraisa lechumra. We said that if it's a sofik, whether it was on Yom Tov or not on Yom Tov, then that we said was only an issa d'rabanon. It's only a gzeira d'rabanon. That a beitza shenolda b'yom tov is issa d'rabanon, so sofik d'rabanon should be lekula. Says Rav Ashi, no. Rav Ashi omar la'olam sofik yom tov sofik chayil. We're going back to what we said originally. It's not about hachana d'rabba. It's not about a yom tov after Shabbos, and therefore if we don't know whether it was noilad on that day, but if it was noilad on that day, it was nisa d'oraisa, then we have to be machmer a sofik d'oraisa l'chumra. No, it could be sofik yom tov, sofik chayil, and it's hava dover sheyesh le matirin, and v'chol dover sheyesh le matirin afilu b'drabanon loy bottle. It could be that it's talking about that the issa here is not it's an issa of, and indeed it's an issa d'rabanon. It's not like a chona d'rabba, which is an issa d'oraisa. It's only an issa d'rabanon, whether it's because of peiros shenoishrim or because of mashkin shezovim. But it's only a midrabanon, and since it's only midrabanon, but even if it's midrabanon, but since it's only osir today, it's not osir. It's not going to be osir tomorrow. Not like a sofik beitza, which comes from a treifa, which is always going to be osir. No, since it's going to become muta, dover sheyesh le matirin is never bottle, and that's why his feika is osir. And in Mirz Hashem in the next year, we're going to continue from here.